How does the TCL Q6MK stack up against something like, let's say the Samsung Q8FN from 2018? A junior flagship champion of champions? Well, we're going to find out in today's video, smack alike for just getting to the point. And the point is simply this: it's a whole hell of a lot closer than I was ever expecting it to be. And this is perfect because you're able to see at a flagship level, junior flagship, which technically beat out the Q9FN in terms of picture quality, making it pretty much the flagship of 2018. You can basically see that the entry level of TCL this year is virtually flagship. Now, there are a couple things that it does differently and wrong, but we're going to talk about that. So let's go to our first thing here, black levels. Everybody's asking, how are the black levels? Phenomenal. Now, to be fair, the black levels on the 2018 Samsung Q8FN didn't have any blooming either. I think this pretty much shows it. You know, you're talking about 2018 and the brand new 2025. The brand new 2025 one has the the HVA panel. So the HVA panel is supposed to give you all these better black levels with the micro or mini LEDs or whatever. Okay, look, it doesn't matter what jargon they throw at you. We want good black levels, we want good brightness, and we want good color along with good motion and processing. That's really what TVs are boiled down to. And trying to figure out which one gets us close to what we want is essentially what we've been after. I can say the TCL struggles in terms of processing comparatively to the flagship level. So you're going to notice things are just going to be a bit more blurry. There's just going to be a level of depth. You can notice it around his arms especially. That just doesn't happen here. There's also a certain level of richness to the color. You can see just how dark and rich the color is versus here. It's just more pale and a little bit lighter by comparison. You could say the same about anything and everything that has a shadow, and where it should have it there, it's a little bit lighter. This is the difference between the flagship level and the entry level and the entry most. Again, this means that when you have strong scenes like this with a lot of lightning, as you can clearly see, it's going to be isolated clearly as three-dimensional objects on a more flagship TV versus something that's more entry level. That's essentially one of the biggest differences between the two. The next would be brightness. There is a massive difference of brightness between these two displays. Now, I don't know what the camera's going to show you or how off this scene is going to ultimately end up looking, but I can tell you that the brightness of the Samsung Q8FN is greater, however, in a more destructive way, so it's not always beneficial to crank up the brightness. If I wanted to, I could make it even brighter than this, but there'd be no point because I'd be losing a lot of detail, which I don't want to do. Now, those trade-offs are not just unique to the Q8FN. The TCL has the same thing, so you have to crank down the brightness a little bit for this too, even though it's not incredibly bright. Keep that in mind. However, TCL does do a better job of isolating clarity. So you can see this is just so much more clear as far as a highlight being rendered, even though it's not as strong, and you can see a lot of realism, a lot of good color quality. But again, Samsung just takes it to another level with the amount of just sheer brightness that they pop off. So do keep that in mind. And again, clarity is still better. Look at this section here comparatively to that where it's more blurry. That's probably one of the biggest takeaways. I mean, especially once you look at this circle and how clear, contrasting with the black background here versus this, this is the difference between high end and entry level. And so for people like saying, hey, I'm looking to upgrade my Q8FN, in certain examples, it will outperform something like a Q8FN. And this is one of those examples. So if you pay close attention, even though it doesn't have the highest brightness, look at what's happening. It's putting the brightness right here, and that highlight clarity just becomes so much sharper and so much clearer because it's able to pump that highlight out, not at a point where it's overpowering, where Samsung, it's kind of overpowering and you lose detail just because it's getting brighter for the sake of being brighter in some areas. But to be fair, back in this time period, we didn't have mini LEDs, so this is actually ahead of its time that it's able to maintain that level of clarity with only having 40 zones of full array local dimming. I mean, we have to give it the credit that credit's due, albeit its age is starting to show up against a mini LED and you're starting to see the clarity differences. Now, as far as color goes, the color is just going to be hit or miss on both TVs. Even though technically the Samsung Q8FN has the wider color gamut, it doesn't mean that all the colors are accurate and that it's being effectively used correctly. So first and foremost, you can see the cyan, okay? The cyan representation is flawless here on the Samsung Q8FN comparatively to what we have on the TCL. However, I would say detail, they are pretty much identical, a like for like. And honestly speaking, that's impressive given that the TCL isn't necessarily even remotely close to the price point or launch price point of the Samsung Q8FN. Now, again, you look at examples like this, you're going to start to see where the Samsung comes through with a better highlight, and you can see that it clearly is the overall brighter TV, as now that there's less contrasted elements on the screen, but there's still contrast where there are highlights that need to be placed. Samsung intelligently goes in and brightens up Deku's face and the highlight emanating from the ground up, giving you that type of lighting. Again, it's not happening here on the TCL. There's nothing intelligent about the lighting here. And this is where, again, you run into the biggest difference you're going to find between these two displays as far as highlight control and things of that nature. Now, let's go a step further. And at this point, I'll mention that the TCL has been calibrated with my in-house calibration standard. Now, if you were to use the reference standard via filmmaker mode, this is what it would look like. It would get dominated on such a level, it wouldn't even be able to compete. Notice how dim filmmaker mode is now getting. This is what I talk about in all of my videos doing comparisons and just talking about reference accuracy at all, even if you're new to the topic, where I say they target making your TV look like a 1990 TV. Because if we go to the next image, you can clearly see the lack of pop. And this is what a lot of people don't realize. Like, you're calibrating it to look like what you're upgrading from because the standards are old. They're ancient, in fact. And the reality is, unless you have somebody that specializes in this and knows how to create their own in-house standard, spoiler, I'm the only one on YouTube that does it, and I haven't met anyone else that does this. You're not going to see what these TVs are truly capable of because the manufacturers are in the business of selling TVs, not optimizing them. And that's where I come in. If you join for $4.99, you can be able to help the channel out. But more importantly for you, to get all this work done for you to go from this back to something like this, where now that's a lot more pop and it's a lot closer to the flagship level, and you're just seeing it in real time. From the brightness to the highlights to the clarity, it is almost a match as far as what I am seeing in the real world. There are some differences as far as contrast and clarity, which I can easily point out right now. You'll notice that this is darker here and it's also clearer here, where this is a bit more on the blurry side. The same can go for the hand. You have touches of little cyan from the ice here, where here it's just more of a cooler, more pale color temperature because unfortunately, it's a budget TV, right? So it's not gonna have, the widest color gamut, and that's where that color gamut coverage loss is actually hurting the TCL. Again, the thing that I've always had as a big problem with TCL is the lack of really sharp lines and brightness to go behind those sharp lines when we talk about highlights on complex geometry. So an example is this right here, how you have a particle effect in the background that goes up like that. But if you look on the other side on the TCL, you can clearly see it's just duller, dimmer, and just doesn't make sense. And that's the part that I really just don't like, if I'm being honest, because that's a downside. Now, it's not all downside though, because in this example, you are clearly seeing where 40 zones of fully local dimming are just hindering the Samsung Q8FN. So this is where you'd want to upgrade. Black level, uniformity, and control on bright contrasted elements. So there are multiple types of contrast. I won't go into all of the micro contrast and so on and so forth, but I will go on to tell you this. In a cityscape like this, where you have the city, you have like the main city here, you have the background city kind of, and then you have the clouds and everything. It's almost like a three-tier image. This is isolated flawlessly on the TCL, picking out every amount of extraordinary detail, color, and clarity. The Samsung is incapable of doing that because it only has 40 zones of full array local dimming to decide where to render the local dimming algorithm and the contrast. And ultimately, it sees a lot of bright elements here and it tries to brighten up, but it ends up over brightening for something that's supposed to be dark. Again, the big idea behind mini LED is that it's able to get closer to OLED quality. And this is your undeniable proof that the TCL, despite not being a flagship, is absolutely a mini LED television because you can clearly see it getting a lot closer OLED, bringing it closer to what would be a pixel level of illumination or black level control, where before on, again, older TVs, we didn't have that, and that's why it looks a lot more pale and a lot more hazy. So while there are examples for sure, as I've shown, where contrast can be like, oh my gosh, this is incredible on the Samsung Q8FN, when you get to scenes like this, cityscapes that are dark, then bright, then dark and bright mixed together, this is gonna struggle a hell of a lot more than something that has more zones to pick up where to brighten and darken. So that's something to keep in mind as well when you're upgrading from an older television. But again, the general feel for this TCL is that it's just incredibly premium. Now, for those at this point wondering why I use anime and I'm not using something like a movie to show this off, anime has so much going on and it's rendered, right? So you have a lot of sharp lines and a lot of bright moments like this that will show you the difference in brightness. Right now, the Q8FN is presenting the better color quality in the blues, but the rest of the image is meh in comparison to what TCL is doing. That brightness is on point. That hair color of yellow is way better than this dead washed yellow, and it just looks phenomenal. And it pulls ahead of what we're getting on the Samsung Q8FN, again, flagship level from 2018. And again, if you've been watching my videos over the years, or maybe you're new to the channel, the Samsung Q8FN has been taking names and kicking ass for years. So to see something like the TCL 6 series arrive at basically a Q8FN level in some areas is impressive, considering, again, it's nowhere near the launch price of a Q8FN from 2018. Now, when you look at images like this, where there's a lot of dark and it's primarily like a bright element, the Q8FN will pull ahead. As you clearly see, it gives you that illumination and that glow. I can only call it like a bioluminescent glow, and that's so delicious. That glow, that like neon light kind of feel is so enjoyable and satisfying to have in highlights. And unfortunately, TCL needs to work on their algorithm to give that effect here, because they just focus on the general scene being all right. And don't get me wrong, it's a watchable image, but it's not impactful. It doesn't grab you. Like when you look at these two images, for example, the color on the TCL, I would say, is better than the color on the Samsung. However, at least as far as accuracy goes. But then you look at little things like the sharpness of the highlight again here, and then you have the brightness here on the cuff here, or over here it's just dim and dull. And that takes away from the impact of these scenes where you know there are highlights bouncing around. You're able to keep more of the ambient light respectively. Now again, here's another example of the color quality difference. I mean, you be the judge. I'm seeing it with my own eyes. That is just way too dark of a shade of red, and the background now is losing some detail where TCL doesn't have that problem, and then the red looks phenomenal. The whole thing on this scene is a total win for TCL. Mini LED, just separating everything the way it's supposed to, providing excellent vibrancy, clarity, and color. I do wish that they did have a little bit better cyan to match the Samsung, but overall it is a slaughter in that example for TCL. But then again, we switch back to here, and again, it's a back and forth kind of game to where TCL is doing literally way better than what anyone was ever willing to give it credit for. How many people, thought, oh, cheap Chinese brand, Samsung is like a flagship big three. Okay, well, your flagship big three doesn't have accurate greens, but look what's happening here. The TCL does have those accurate greens. Now, to be fair, and for total transparency, I am totally aware that there are multiple ways you can set up a TV and do things a different way, and yada yada. And I know that newer TVs have newer tech, but I'm showing this off also to give you a point of reference for people who might have an older TV and might want to upgrade, because, who really wants to sit there on old tech forever? Especially with all this exciting terminology coming out. And look at what impressive quality it gives. I personally am truly blown away. When you look at her skin tones and how gorgeously accurate they are, the color green in the background, the pinks, everything, and then you look at how washed out it is comparatively on the Q8FN, you're starting to see the Q8FN's age. And even though it does have better highlights and better brightness in this example, as you can clearly see, the brightness right here better than the brightness right here, which is dim and dull. I get it. But brightness isn't the only thing we ought to be looking at. It's also the quality of the colors. Again, it gets really hard for a lot of people, I understand, to put this in perspective. Now, again, I want to put it in perspective by telling you your TV will never come this way. We'll go to filmmaker mode again to show you this is what it would have looked like. And then if we were to go off of filmmaker mode, the reference accurate mode, very clearly what I've created on the Q8FN absolutely decimates what you'd get out of the box on TCL. So you'd never see what I'm talking about if you go to their accurate mode for their calibrators. Now, we'll go to standard mode. More of the same. You'd never see what I'm talking about as a massive difference unless you join and get the settings that I offer, because look at how dead and how lifeless it is. And you see with just my settings how big of a difference it makes, and look, it is now decimating a Samsung Q8FN. You know, this for me is a really important comparison because this is showing something that no other YouTuber has shown before. At the absolute flagship level from 2018, a TV that has gone through and chomped, go look through the years I've been doing reviews, go in the comparison playlist here on YouTube, okay, that I have here on this channel. You'll see the Q8FN has been a champion. For TCL to be doing this is mind-blowing stuff because this is their entry level. So can you imagine their flagship this year? I'm excited to say the least, and I can't wait to see just how incredible it's going to be because you're seeing some serious gains. Now, not everything is perfect. Again, this is where wider color gamut, again, is going to be a bit of a victory, if you will, for Samsung, because you can see more of the blue here and it separates from the blue there, where unfortunately here you have separation and you have sharp lines and clarity more than you have on the Samsung for sure. The color quality just isn't the same or as nice in that example. So color, again, will trade back and forth, but look at these scenes and really ask yourself, would you pay flagship money to walk away with a Q8FN, or would you use something like this, the TCL? Now, the other reason that a lot of people will completely have missed if they didn't watch this far in the video, why I'm using particularly anime to do this, is because this year TCL has an HDR feature. It's called their auto HDR conversion that turns SDR into HDR. And then I'm also on the Samsung Q8FN, which is one of the only TVs that still have this in it, is the HDR Plus feature that converts SDR to HDR on the Samsung side of things. So that's why we're using this, okay? A lot of people might at first feel like, oh, that's not a fair comparison. When you really go back in the years, this is one of the only TVs left that still has a feature like this. They've ripped them out of every TV because if they put them back, I can guarantee you our TVs will look way better even still than what they are now. To take SDR and convert it to HDR oftentimes looks better than native HDR. It's insane, especially when you give it the BT 2020 color coverage. It's ridiculous, at least as a forcible option. But again, you guys are seeing in real time, very tangible proof that TCL is not only a cut above the rest of the competitors, they are redefining what it means to be a budget tier, what it means to be entry level. And I wanted to do this in the most organic way possible to show you these mind-blowing results. Look at how beautiful this image is versus that. And again, it doesn't come like that, okay? You have to join my settings or my community to get that. But if you do, you will escape this look. This is what it launches like. And again, if this is how you watch your TV, let's say nobody uses filmmaker mode. Let's say we go straight to vivid mode. Okay, this is what it would have looked like. Even still, you have a lot of issues with over brightening and it just doesn't look good. And my point is, why live that way? Why do it that way? When you can go from this ugly image to this, where you have all this gorgeous color and ambient light and so on, so forth. The point being clear, TCL is no longer a budget brand. This comparison proves it. Period. It proves it. TCL is every bit as good as what Samsung is offering. Look at Samsung, look at TCL. In this example, they've exceeded what Samsung can do. Now, another reason why I'm showing this particular comparison with these two TVs specifically, there has not, I repeat, there has not been a single Samsung Qled TV and recent years, including last year, that is capable of beating the Q8FN. This means that every single QLED from Samsung that you could purchase will get defeated by this TCL right here. That's monumental stuff, guys, because it's showing you in real time. The times have changed, the big three got complacent, and now look who's coming up and snatching the crown. TCL, a Chinese brand that nobody wanted to give credit, but I'm going to give the credit. They are damn incredible, exceptional, and amazing. And against the Samsung Q8FN in terms of picture quality, we've looked at black levels, we've looked at contrast clarity, highlight clarity, color quality. Everything you look at this example, for crying out loud. TCL is blowing over the Samsung. So while Samsung does ultimately win in terms of the color gamut, the highlight overall that you can get, how bright you can get, you know, it has its wins, the processing capabilities where things won't look as blurry. TCL has a very, very, very compelling argument. And I think if you're honest with yourself, you're going to give them a look and walk away with something that's going to give you damn near flagship level performance for an entry level price. And that, my friends, is really as simple as I can put it. It's basically at the 20-minute mark. I'll be here all day telling you how incredible this TCL is versus the Samsung. But let's see how it does against WOLED, because that's also on the market. I have a Sony OLED and I have an LG OLED. So let me know which ones you want to see in the next video and we'll make it happen. Thanks so much for watching the #1 brand in honesty, and until the next video, this TCL is freaking awesome.